Thank you, Madam Chairman, committee members. I'm happy to see that the other half of the Arctic Coalition of America is here, so thank you for staying for the hearing, Senator King. My name is Richard Glenn. I'm the Vice President of Lands for Arctic Slope Regional Corporation. It's an Alaska Native corporation created by Congress in 1971. It's headquartered on the North Slope, and it includes villages such that extend from the west to the east in the Arctic region of Alaska, from Point Hope, Point Lay, Wainwright, Atkasuk, Utkarvik, Nurksit, Kaktovik, and Anaktuvik Pass. North Slope village residents there have always depended upon subsistence resources from the land, the rivers, and the ocean. I'm a tribal member. Mr. Shutt is a tribal member. Matthew Rexford, who spoke before me, is a tribal member. Our Lieutenant Governor is a tribal member, and I was particularly stung by the ranking member's comments that said she didn't see tribal members. And maybe she just didn't find enough tribal members that agreed with her position. I hope that you hear from all of the tribal members of the state of Alaska, the majority of whom support safe, responsible exploration and development in ANWR. And I'm also not here to debate the sacredness of the land on either side of the Brooks Range, the north or the south. For us, all the lands are sacred. They contain the bones of our ancestors. And I'm not talking about ancient people, I'm talking about people in living memory. We didn't start burying our dead until around the 1920s. So my great-grandparents were the first generation of folks who were buried right after the flu epidemics swept through the region. Before those days, the tradition was to leave the residence, however temporary it was, where the person died. So ancient sod houses, up until the early 1900s, carry the bones of our people. And some of my ancestors' bones, my grandfather's grandmother, are in Prudhoe Bay. Others are scattered along the coastal plain from the Canadian border to Point Hope. Our people are named after the places. The places are named after the people. And some of it is state land, some of it is federal land, some of it is native-owned land, but it's all equally sacred. Yet we depend on that land for development. We depend upon that land for food. And I don't wish to trivialize anyone's dependence on the resources because ours is equally as important. ASRC, as a corporation, owns a piece of this heritage, 92,000 acres of land on the coastal plain of ANWR, along with Matthew Rexford's village corporation, the Kaktovik Inupiat Corporation. These lands hold resource potential for oil and gas development. I'm a geologist by training. I help drill and develop natural resources on the North Slope. I know the practices related to drilling. And I've seen the evolution over the past 50 years and 30 or so years of my own professional life from really simple drilling, cementing, and production to the ornate and efficient diagrams that you've seen here on the posters that Mr. Shutt presented so effectively. The reduced footprint is real. Hundreds of square miles drained by tens of acres of development. Senator King asked, how many wells are we talking about? How much surface impact? We have real-world answers to those questions. They're here at the table. They're here in the audience. In the west end of today's exploration, west on the Colville River Delta and just to the west, where the native folks from another village 100 miles from Kaktovik also own some resource potential. 500 wells have been drilled, down to depths around 8,000 or 9,000 feet and radiating outward as far as 5 or 6 miles. On these 500 wells, production wells, injector wells, they're done from 4 basic central facilities for drilling, covering maybe 300 acres of land. So now we're talking real-world examples, real-world numbers of wells for, at its peak, hundreds of thousands of barrels per day in production. That's the kind of development that we envision moving in to the coastal plain of ANWR. This is a cartoon. This diagram shows dramatic exaggerations. If you follow the scale of this map The dots themselves are 2 miles across each. The well symbols themselves are 3 miles high. The pipelines, if they're shown as they're shown on this map, that's a pipeline that would be a 1/4 mile wide. This is not realistic. If you want to see realistic development, look at realistic numbers, go to the areas of modern exploration and development. And yet, one thing we learn in production is production declines. Starts at a peak and begins a decline. And the lion in the room on Alaska production is Prudhoe Bay. The Prudhoe Bay and the Kupara River oil fields were supergiant oil fields. And we're on the shoulders of their decline. And the new discoveries, as significant as they are, and as thankful as I am that they've been discovered, they can't match the slope of the decline. They only change its slope. Still a decline. Meanwhile, 92,000 acres and the million or so acres of the coastal plain of Anwar, area set aside just for its energy potential, lies fallow. And we can't even test their potential unless Congress acts. We think that the Alaska Native landowners at Kaktovik and the folks from the Arctic Slope region cannot realize their right to economic self-determination if Congress fails to lift the prohibition on safe and responsible exploration and development of the coastal plain. So Congress needs to act. My organization was an agreement made between Congress and the tribes of Alaska. We didn't ask for it. In fact, we fought against it. But we're living with the results. And so in our region, we have a braided relationship of municipalities, tribes, and ANCSA corporations. We're all welded together, braided together like a rope. So you can't separate tribe from corporation. And you can't separate our mother's languages from the language of discourse we're using here today. I could speak in the language of my mother, and it would be gibberish to you, and frankly, disrespectful to everybody. The only indigenous people that should be listened to the loudest are the folks from Kaktovik. And today's hearing, to me, shows there's a lack of attention paid to them. Listen to what they're saying. They need an economy. They need development in their area. They want to have the freedom to do what the rest of the country seemingly takes for granted. We're talking about reliable power and water and schools and the ability to use sanitation that keeps their kids healthy. I strongly recommend that the committee look at the testimony of the folks from the village of Kaktovik. If you look at the tribal folks from throughout Alaska, we don't agree 100%, but the majority do agree. We believe that wildlife and development can coexist. They already do today. In fact, we're collaring caribou that are calving in the area of current development around Prudhoe Bay and the Kupara River field. This is the Central Arctic caribou herd. The Alaska Fish and Game, US BLM, and North Slope Borough wildlife biologists are collaring caribou that are calving in the area of infrastructure and then migrating south to Arctic Village to be hunted by our Gwich'in neighbors to the south. So we already are hunting caribou who are calving in areas of development. I've had the honor of taking some of you on tours of North Slope development. We see caribou there, underneath pipelines, sometimes underneath facilities like man camps and hotels, and when they're trying to get away from summer mosquitoes, caribou will go anywhere. They'll be laying down right on the tundra next to the buses that are taking the Codels through the area. The caribou aren't afraid.
Richard, we're going to have to ask you to wrap up. As
The
good as this
caribou
is.
aren't afraid because they're not being hunted. They're not being hunted there. So wildlife and infrastructure can coexist. We speak in favor of a safe and expeditious opening of the 1002 area. It will be good for our region, our state, and our country. Thank you.